What's going on, everyone? My name is Winslow, but you know that already. So let's get to it. Yeah. So this is a man in his kettle. This is what the project looks like. Very bog standard for my projects. As usual, breakdown. Just gonna go through a few things. There's not a ton of specifically, I guess, interesting things with this. It's more of a just rolls on. It's kind of simple. Like the musical ideas carry it more than anything technical about it, especially this. But I'm like, overall, big picture, like I'm really happy with this tune. Like aside from all the nonsense jokes about teas and kettles and all that. Um, yeah, I mean, that's it kind of worked out in the middle because I like wrote this completely like left of that whole kettle madness, tea gate, whatever you want to call it. But then when I needed a name at the end, I was like, oh, just call it that. And then I stuck the sample of Josh at the end. Siren, help me out. Yeah, somehow, the universe works out. Anyway, if you haven't heard it, it sounds like this. Yeah, and that's kind of the gist of it. For how many minutes? 4 more minutes? 5 minutes? Nah. Yeah, it was a bit longer than Pilot UKF were like, can you shorten it? And yeah. What's new? Anyway, let's start at the beginning. Everyone wants to know about drums. There's nothing special here. What does it sound like? Pretty standard for me. Every, 8 or so bars, another variation, another drum break comes in. Some extra cymbals right there. Wider break, it just adds a bit of, like on its own, sounds terrible. Josh, shut up. I already know what you're thinking. But it fills in space, adds a bit more lift, a bit more air to the drums, I think. Just to toss in there, periodically, as you see, it's kind of muted and in and whatnot. Yeah, let's just go kind of piece by piece because that's always helpful. So this kick, it's from a loop. It's a Lensman loop. It's a kick I've been using lately, just because it has everything I like in a kick: the punch, the top end, bit of a hybrid between an organic drum sound and like a really clear synthesized kick. Use the same kick in To Walk a Mile. These are similar time frames, I think. I wrote both of those and a few other tunes, I think. Yeah, nothing really special there. Quick little trick to add variation in your kicks is to pitch them and velocity. So see, like each kick isn't hitting it the same. And some of them are longer and shorter than the other. And then another thing is like there's a slight pitch bend. So it's like buke, but it's a short kick. So it's all just to make it feel like an actual drummer, like hitting with a kick drum. Because I mean, the best, most robotic playing drummers still don't hit exactly the same intensity, and then drums don't produce the exact same pitch every time unless they're like really, really tightly tuned, and a kick drum most likely isn't. There's just slight variations in timing and pitch, which makes it sound a bit more real. So, second floor tip, not quite top tip. Then we got like the clap. I call it snare clap because that's what it is. Honestly, I probably didn't have to do all this, but I did. with all these different layers. So we got Linsman clap from the same break, I think, but high passed, mic kiss rim shot. Again, you can kind of see it short, long, short, long. Just add a bit of variation in the sound. Another snare from a break that's being used down here. I just cut it apart. And a live kind of clap loop. So there's variation to every hit. And altogether, well, it doesn't really add anything actually, listening to it. Honestly, this was like, I mean, as I do, like lift things from other tracks I'm working on, to where a lot of these layers in that track were adjusted differently to where like it was more clappy and the organic kind of hand clap sound was a bit more to the front. And in this one, I pulled it back because, well, in the context of this track, it just fits a little better. But I still like the layers and the feeling I get. I just adjusted it, you know? Okay, so most of these are just EQ'd, most or not even EQ'd. Cool. And then processed together. That's no processing. I kind of killed the sound. Well, out of context, it sounds like that's a weak clap, but full break, it kind of carries its weight, I think. It's not annoying, but maybe that's just me being like, yeah, it's cool, you know, instead of being like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. But for anyone that cares, not really a big thing, but bus processing is one of those things that's going to be very personal, I think, to get the sound you want, but it's all about gelling the layers together. So we got EQ, Camel Crusher, compression. The compressor's not on, but like distortion acts as a bit of saturation, a bit of gluing. It's not a ton. Transient Shaper, my favorite. No Attack. Pull down and sustain a little bit just to tame it after being crushed by a camel a little bit. Got Smexoscope. It's hard saying that word. Just so I can like manage the peaks as I'm working on it. So it's not spiky. Another EQ. This is where like mixing and stuff comes in. So it's just slight here and there, pulling in the sides, like a dB in that area, you know, to fit with the rest of the drum breaks and everything else is going on. Another one. Yeah. So I just EQ in stages. It kind of ones like up to here is like sound design, all these plugins, the EQ, Camel Crusher, Transient Master. That's to get the sound I want. Then the EQ afterwards is usually more broad strokes mix adjustments to get the fit in the mix. And I like doing that in stages. Then we have like a panning thing where I bring in the width a bit more so it's not as wide. This is still the clap. Another mix thing, sometimes a wide clap works, but this mix is a bit dense at times. Not as much as I usually do, but enough to where there's so much other stereo information from the piano and the pads that I didn't want the clap to like distract from it, so I pulled it in just a bit. So it kind of lives in its central space instead of being out there. Yeah. And then a gain plugin because what do I do? Am I even doing anything with it? Oh, it's just, I kind of taper it off at the end. And it goes through like some effects and whatnot. Yeah, it's a clap. Again, nothing super technical. I'm kind of flying through this some way, but I mean, once you've seen like one of these breakdowns for me, it's kind of like, oh yeah, you just kind of do the same thing every track, different sounds. And that's kind of how it is. Yeah, so kick, clap. So I'll go through a drum reverb as well, and I'll get to that. Yeah, you can kind of hear the difference. there's like slight variation between each of them, but not enough to be distracting, but enough that, you know, you take it away, it feels different and adds a bit more interest. There's like variations in length of, say, the tails of like each clap or rim shot, the layers. And then there's variations with like the live clap element to it, even though it's a bit more subtle. And in the full like mix, it's not something you're really going to pick out, but it's there and it adds to the overall depth in a sense. All right, percussion bus. So all these breaks and percussion loops. Then we go there. Actually, everything's like going over here. Let's go here. All right. It's got a weird like phasey break layer. Just sounds like this. Through a phaser and a chorus and some reverb, and it just feels in space. That's it. Has a bit of ear candy. I want to call it that. Shuffle. The snare that was in this break is doubled and up here into the clap bus. Processing on these is just EQ and transient shaping just to take down the sustain, make it a bit tighter. Yes, I know I do it a lot, but it works. So it just works. And a shaker. My favorite one as of late. Got the right kind of groove and the right kind of sound to it. And I did like chop up and rearrange it just so it, wow, it's not that clipped. I just got it zoomed in. There you go. To where it just fits the rhythm. Because as you know, I like the swing stuff. Pretty hard. Especially with this track. Anyway, another loop. Fills in space, adds a bit of something. It just kind of drones out throughout the whole track, as you can see. It's the intro loop as well. I just left it in there. Then you got this one, which is, we all know, this break. Just high pass, then spread out to the sides. Yeah. That's a filler break. Nothing important about it. Helps fill in the sound. So that's the drum, almost. Okay, so all the percussion is bussed together, same as I usually do. High pass, make sure there's nothing really going on. Percussion wise, kind of a light roll off. Yeah, nothing crazy. For cleanliness, Camel Crusher, always use it just for that slight tube distortion, saturation, whatever. Transient Master, pulled it in just a little bit. And I do this like in stages because when you add compression, and stuff like that, it flattens out the sound and you lose a bit of the contour you might have had in the beginning. So this is it's one way to kind of bring that shape back into it. I could go in and volume shape things. I could bounce it out and do it. I could use a regular compressor and dial in the settings. I don't really care for that because this just kind of works. Yeah, to each their own. And then these are the side chain compressors. This one's for the kick. Just slight enough for that transit from the kick to pop through. Nothing crazy. That one's for the clap. Just for the transit to pop through really fast. Not until you get like the ducking feeling, but just things can pop in and just have the space, you know? It's more of a mixing thing instead of like a sound thing. I don't know how to say that. And then this is like balance, mix EQ, just slide things like sibilance sort of area, grossness up there, some mid stuff, nothing crazy. And then a utility plugin, because that's how I do all my gain adjustments and automation. It's a good thing to get used to using like utility gain plugins, stuff like that. So you can leave your mixer as is, and you don't automate that because you'll want to make adjustments there, and you'll do any kind of volume automation from a plugin that's like the end of your chain. So you'll see them a lot as I go through here. All right. Kick is not. Sometimes I route the kick to the reverb for a little space. Not this time. Clap and percussion sent to a drum reverb. Nothing. That's some weird EQ. I don't know. But I EQ'd into it, EQing before your sends, before your reverb is good. So it only reverberates certain sound you want. Then vintage verb, preset tweaked. Nothing special there. And EQ'd, kind of get rid of that mid range. And good old sausage fattener to just kind of even out the sound, bring it up a little bit. It's basically compression. And compressing like reverb, delay sends, stuff like that helps keep it even and kind of glue things within the mix. Yeah. And that all goes into a drum bus. Look at all this. So no drum bus plugins. Now it's on. And it's not a whole lot of difference because I gain stage. Good stuff right there. Pro tip, real pro tip. Gain staging, making sure your levels going in and levels coming out of plugins are all the same so you know what you're actually doing. So like if I go one by one, Camel Fat, basically doing what I usually do with Camel Crusher. It's just another plugin. So like that's my level, right? And we're peaking around, well, don't worry about the meters because it's going to change. When I turn it on, like turning it off and on, the volume doesn't really change. But it is taming peaks that are in the drums, because if I bring this up, so this is off. And there aren't a whole lot of peaks this time around because I kind of did it in stages. Well, I did do it in stages, not I kind of did. But when I turned it on, some of those peaks are gone. There's a bit more body to it because it's going through a bit of compression. Or a bit of saturation from the tube distortion. 9%. Pretty good. Yeah, I'm not doing a whole lot of effects on this bus. I'm mainly reinforcing the sound, more or less. But again, gain staging, so the volume going in is what's coming out. That way it's not just louder when it comes out and you're like, yeah, that sounds better, but you're not actually doing anything. Louder will trick you. Coffee break. I should be drinking tea since this is the tea tune. Anyway, mix EQ, little dip, little rise. Who cares? Another EQ, shape, add a bit of top end, take a bit of the mids. And that's not really mid. It doesn't matter. There's nothing there. Yeah, a bit more top end, sparkle, sheen. Sometimes I sometimes I like to use the drive, just a bit more saturation because it's like an analog model EQ, and it works. But with the same idea of gain staging, I would use like another gain plugin afterwards and make sure I compensate so I know what I'm doing. Then ozone to do a little bit of limiting. Just to tame those peaks. That's it. If we look at, so off and then on. Yeah, very subtle. It's really just getting those spikes and the little things and kind of evening out the sound a bit more. And again, gain staging. So see, it's coming in at this level and it's leaving. It's coming in at negative 24 dB and it's leaving at negative 24 dB because I pulled this thing down. It's the output. So when I bypass it, it's relatively the same volume, but I do get the effect of limiting it. So again, gain staging, super important with all sounds, especially drums. That's drum bus. Yep. Okay, bass. Let's fly through this. Nothing important. Sine waves, triangle waves, saturation. That's about it. Profit. What is it? Silent? Of course it is. I don't do anything else. No new version. Triangle wave. That saw is not even in there at all. So yeah, it's just triangle wave. Bit of distortion. There's a little chorus. It gives it a kind of different flavor, I think. That's more solid sounding to me. It adds a bit of extra dimension. It's not really doing a lot, and I don't have it making it any wider. It's still a mono sub. Bit of compression within the plugin. I literally just flick this thing on and it just does what I want it to do. Yeah. Then camel fat, saturation, what's new? EQ, wait, that's the wrong channel. Sorry. Saturator. It's a free plugin. Look at this. I'm pushing it to saturate it a bit more and then pulling it back. So pushing the input to saturate it more. And then pulling the output back to balance it. Not the 100% signal because that's a little gross. Kind of mixing it in there. Take it off. And then put it on. Yeah, it just adds a little bit more oomph to the sound. And you can see the analyzer gets a bit more active in that mid-range where the harmonics are doing their job. Then EQ to low pass because there's a lot of weird high stuff going on. Yeah. So I pushed the sound pretty hard and then I EQ'd out all that like mid-range gunk that appeared. I didn't EQ it out by necessarily, but I moved it in a way to where it's not as prominent while still getting the sound I want. And there's a ton of different ways to do this, but I just do it the lazy way or my way. Because you see it's all there, but it's like I got rid of it. Anyway. Yeah, it's saturated triangle wave. It does its job. It's pretty weighty. I like it. Then just a little layer to go up top. Hard to hear. It's basically like a Rhodes keyboard sound. EQ'd. I did have it stereo at first, but then once like the final mix down and everything, I was like, I don't really need it that way. So I made it mono. And it adds a bit of color to go on top of the sub. Yeah, layering like a solid like sub bass, triangle, sine, whatever you want to do. And then layering a more organic type sound. Or yeah, more organic type sound. Like I like to do pianos or Rhodesy kind of keyboard sounds or upright bass. I talked about this, I think, in a previous video once, but just to add a bit of interest and a bit more harmonic content that isn't necessarily just distorting and saturating another synth, you know? Yeah. And then it's all in the bass bus, which is saturated more with Saturn. EQ, I'm pushing the drive this time. From again, saturation, subtle, 1 dB, 2 dBs here and there. Bit of EQ, take off all the highs, not that that really does anything. EQ for balance, that's kind of the kick area a little. Just tame it. Then track spacer, so it fits with the kick. So And the kick is only, yeah, it's very fast. It's only like that initial transient. And again, it's peaking in that kind of 80-ish hertz area where this is. And they both kind of work in tandem, make space. It's not really as heavy as I might do it sometimes when I have like a fatter, more like rounder, houseier style kick. Then this bass isn't all that, heavy in the context of the track anyway. So, kick bass. Oh wait, there's another layer. Classic like M1 type sound. Nothing special. Sounded like butt cheeks till I EQ'd it. Yeah, just to clean up the sound. And then all together. It's not really a bass sound, but it's in the bass group because that's it's like the family I want it to belong to. Like they're all playing the same riff. So I process them all together so it feels more like one sound instead of like sticking it in the other area with the other stuff. So yeah, that's that. Cool. We're moving through it. You got all the melodic junk up here. Random vocal sample from Splice, pitch down, how original. Another one, just cut a vocal, like a second out of it. Splice. Yep. All right, got a piano here. From Contact. And all it has is like a chorus to give it that warbly sound. So no plugins. I think I played this. I think I played it in and I just adjusted the velocity to be basically all even. Kind of gives it that dance piano like chunky sound. But yeah, it works for what it is. This does have kind of like an old ravey, not ravey, but you know what I mean, like that era of house music kind of sound. I got the M1 organ sound going in the bass line. So yeah, just made sense. But with plugins, for color, so EQ, that's the money right there, this plugin. The chorus, the choral from Native Instruments. Isto vinyl, EQ. Look at all those peaks, and some of them are because of the chorus. Camel Crusher, bit of compression actually this time, and heavier on the saturation-y part. I'm due for a music radar. I'm a computer music tutorial. Filter, cause why not? Playing with the stereo width. It's barely doing anything, but if you just turn this plugin on, it has an effect, and I kind of like it. So, delay, spacey dubbier sound, vintage verb, because reverb, EQ. Then a final EQ, to really clean up the sound. And this is mixing. So high passing it. Yeah, I don't really have a full piano sound. It's more of a part of the whole, small part of a big whole. As far as the piano, then the Rhodes keyboard, then all the atmosphere and pad stuff goes. So some cuts in the mid range, boost in the highs a bit. So off. Honestly, that's kind of good right there. But then once the whole mix gets going, that's why I kind of added this one. It really thins it. It doesn't thin it out too much to where like on its own, it still works. But within the context of everything else, feels full. Ooh, those chord changes, which are not special at all. I just like how they sound. String pad. What is this? OE strings. Originals, epic strings. Yeah, Spitfire. Yeah, it's one of like the cheap $30 sample libraries because I can't afford the big $500 ones. Just not rolling it yet. Rhodes. Can't hear. So this same like Rhodes sound is the same one as down here in the bass line, but just affected differently. And it's all like low pass. I don't think I even automated all that much. Like it opens a little bit, but it's more for a pad like sound. That's why it's in the background. And it's to reinforce the piano. So like I took the body out, like EQ'd the body out of the piano, but when I put this under it, it feels full again, but with a bit of extra character. That's really light. And those are just two different Rhodesy type sounds. Yeah, I'm not going to go too much into processing. They're both bust together so I can affect them separately. So we got Rhodes, which is like a multi-sample thing that comes with Personas or Studio One, and another one. So same deal, two different flavors. That one sounds like that. That one's a bit more mellow. I really like that sound. It makes me want to just like start a new project, but I gotta finish this video first, just for you all, you know. Yeah, but I processed them together. Lo-fi plugin called the Magic Switch. It's free. Let me take this off. Adds a bit of color, you know. All these lo-fi plugins do these days. EQ, compression, saturation, EQ for shape, a bit more high end, take out the low end, pull some of the gross mids out, low pass because that makes it liquid, mixing, utility plugin to compensate for gain in certain, for the volume in certain sections. So like it's louder here, and it backs out there, then it comes back up, that kind of thing. It makes an ever evolving sound, an ever evolving arrangement. Like if it was an orchestra or band, you know, you have crescendo, decrescendo. They're not always playing the same volume the entire time. So that's a way to put that in the tune. Yeah. That's it for that. Yeah, then we got atmospheric stuff, very much throwing sounds at the wall. If you watch a few videos back about just basically throwing it in the soup of EQ delays and reverbs and EQs, big long ones that you just throw stuff in the background. That's all this is. We got pad, Inspire. I don't know what this is. Oh, massive. What do you know? I swear I never use that plugin. And when I do, I'm like, huh? I use that? Anyway. BBC Orchestra Free. Some ostinato type lines. Ostinato is a repeated melodic phrase, but not quite a melody. So it's just like ba-mema, ba-mema, ba-mema. And this was like da-da-da-da-da-da. And they all kind of work together. Okay, it'd be good if I took all the effects off. So that's no effects, right? Sounds kind of dumb, honestly. But once you toss it through a bus of delay, EQ, stereo, filter, tremolo, big boy reverb, EQ, compression, EQ. There's a lot of EQs because you run into problems to where there's so much just stupidness going on. You gotta EQ notch out all these frequencies. But when you do, it kind of works. Again, it's background. It fills in the void that is my mix down or my sound stage. That makes more sense. Yeah, once all those are on, it just feels like one big pad. And it really is just throwing in at plugins. Like I just copied this bus over from, what was it, To Walk a Mile, that tune? And then threw all this stuff in there. Yeah, I call it ATMs because it's atmosphere and it's like an ATM. It just prints money. It's golden, whatever you throw in there. At least I say that now. Because the track got released, so I clearly did something right, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, that's like the melodic area. And all these, like the atmosphere, it's usually like pads, but I just call it that. And then the Rhodes bus and all the other melodic junk are going into just like a more melodic, the synths, the pads style bus. And it says track spacer on it, but I don't know why. Or I have an idea. Yeah, just let the kick pop through a little bit because it gets a bit dense times. It's not like a heavy side chain, but it's let the kick pop in there. And there's not a lot in that low end anyway, but it helps. So altogether, that's the track, basically. As usual, if you want me to like go over something a bit more, just like let me in the comments, let me know. I relatively do the same thing every track. I think this is more of a musical thing. The music ideas carry it more than the technical bits, I guess. That's a way of putting it. All right. There's effects, splashes here and there. Again, just throwing them through delays. Whoosh. Yeah. I mean, if you have a delay and you have some EQs, clean it up. That's all you need for this. Yeah. And then the vocal. There's a vocal. There's two. There's this one.
Imagine everything you ever wanted shows up.
Yeah. And that's a bounce. It's going through a guitar rig preset, which is up here, which is just a lot of tape echo. Yeah. It's the same one I used in Mumbles of Grace. When that vocal comes in, it just, adds a bit of character. It's a similar sound. So I'm kind of like referencing my own tracks in a way, quoting myself, something like that. I'm not going to go deep into that. Toss a preset on. It's just bog standard, basically. Look at me being British. Bog standard. And then there's featured artist Josh Siren with
And that is how you make a cup of tea.
Yep, going through the same guitar rig preset. Yeah. And that is A Man and His Kettle. It's yeah. It's really yeah, that's it. I don't know what else to say. I think musically the structure's a bit weird. You see, it just kind of there's a little 16 bar break. And it was 32 at first. They were like shorten it. I didn't want to shorten the roll. I didn't want to shorten the other part, so I just shortened the break down from 32 to 64 or 16 bars. So it really does roll for a while. And at times, which is difficult, I think, but I kept taking away more elements. Kind of this section is, it sets the tone. If I unmute it, you'll hear it. So you get to sit in that groove with 32 bars. And then you get the organ-y part, reinforces the bass line with a bit more interest. You can see the automation, the Rhodes pad slightly pulls back to make room for that organ-y sound. Again, it's a arrangement type thing. It's growing, decrescendo, crescendo, whatever. I get. Wait, that's Italian and then French. Anyway, and then you have this next 32 bar section, which is the piano. So it's constantly moving and pushing forward, and I'm just building on the idea that is the bass line. That's what everything roots from. The piano is just more fleshed out. It's a realization of the chord progression that I have set in the bass line. Because if you look at the piano, you look at the bass line, the bass notes of the piano, it's just the bass line. Yeah. And then the bass line. That's it. And yeah. So just moving, developing, constantly developing. It's a hard thing to do, and I've struggled with it for a while, and I kind of get it now. Like, I think I nailed it with Mumbles of Grace, and then this kind of takes it a bit further, I think. But yeah, one of those things I'm always working on. Arrangements are tough. I don't want it to just be like, oh, your regular structure, 32, 48 bar intro, 128 bars, 32 bar breakdown, 128 bar, 32 bar outro. Yeah. So kind of front loaded, and then the back end, a little break just to give you a little break, and then quick little ending bits, then kind of fades out. I think the outro is a bit long, actually. If anything, like it could have just dropped right after the end. But yeah, hindsight's 2020, I guess. That's when I wrote the track. Bam, and I'm done. I got nothing else to say. Yeah, if you haven't heard it, go check it out on all the platforms, all that good stuff. And I hope this was useful. I'm trying to look around and see if I didn't master this, by the way. I have some mastering plugins, just limiter, EQ, like a self master, but they pilot send it off to Bo. It's an 8.7, I believe. So if you don't like it, it's his fault. It's not, but Anyway, that's the tune. Man in His Kettle. I've been Winslow, and I will remain Winslow's unless I get sued for copyright or something. But that's my name, so I'll try not to wear it out. Anyway, I'm done.